Well, thank you for joining us, everyone. I think we'll go ahead and get started, and perhaps some other folks will join us along the way. My name is Andrea Morse, and I'm the Interim Assistant Director for Study Abroad at the University of Wisconsin-Stout. And thank you very much for being with us today. We have Lily and Ramona with us to present the session. So I'm going to hand it over to them. They'll be able to introduce themselves, and then they'll go ahead and start the presentation. So thank you. And also, please place any questions you have in the chat box. Thank you.
Andrea, thank you so much. Hi, everybody. It's so nice to see some familiar names. My name is Lily. I'm joined by my colleague, Ramona. We're really excited to present to you today. So welcome to our presentation. Boundary waters, are you staying afloat at your workplace? We are really excited to be talking about this topic here today. Just a few housekeeping notes. If you would just please stay muted throughout the presentation. We'll ask for feedback here and there for sure. This is definitely an interactive session, so get ready for that if you weren't already prepared for it. And we'll have time for questions at the end, but feel free to use chat during the presentation like Andrea mentioned. So as you can see on the screen now, we're super excited to be here. My name is Lily Andrules. I'm a regional director for ISA and TEAN by WorldStrides. I work with schools in the Midwest, including Wisconsin, and I'm based out of Chicago. But today I'm joining you all from the road, much like many of us regional directors do during our semesters. My pronouns are she, her, and I'll let Ramona introduce herself.
Thanks, Lily. Hi, everyone. My name is Ramona Washington. I'm an International Programs Manager on the Study Abroad team in the Center for International Education at UW-Milwaukee, Afloat. I work with exchange programs, provider-based programs, direct enroll programs, short-term faculty-led programs, basically all the programs. So I'm really excited to be here. Hopefully you've had a great conference so far, and thank you. We appreciate you joining this session this afternoon, the last concurrent session block of the day. So hopefully we can impart some insight onto you, and you can do the same perhaps as we go through this presentation. So thank you.
I think you made a very good point. This is definitely one of those that's a little collaborative here. So we'll just do a quick review of the agenda so you know what to expect today. We're going to start off by reflecting on our own biases around work, talk about setting boundaries, kind of like the title says, around your work time. We'll move on to discussing flexibility at your workplace and dive into reclaiming your own time. And we'll finish on being kind to yourself. For some of this may be easy, or for some of the people here, it may be easy information. But if you're here, you might find yourself struggling with one of these. So this information may apply completely or in portions. We're excited to kind of cover it. Your takeaways today should include the practicing the art of saying no, how to create routine, and sticking to a schedule. So let's get started. Let's talk about biases. This is an area where we'll invite you to unmute or post in the chat. So what are some biases you may have about work? And I know that can be a little bit of a broad topic and maybe a broad question. So I'll start with an example. I definitely hold a bias at my work that if I see somebody on their phone constantly, I assume they're not working. Being a regional director, you actually hear this a lot when they're on the road, like so-and-so was on their phone a lot at this fair. And it's not really a fair bias at all. Many of us do work on our phones. It's really common for me when I'm with a student who wants to talk about the exact dates or the exact pricing of something for me to pull it up on my phone. So it's not really fair for me to be making that judgment on other people because that could be exactly what they're doing as well. And we shouldn't be jumping to conclusions about how others work. I don't know if anybody has a similar story or maybe the way they perceive the right way to work, but feel free to jump in if you've got an anecdote.
I can share one that I think that I might have actually. So one that I've had in the past, I think I moved away from it, but and it's kind of old school, but one that I think prevails to this day, to some extent at least, is that if someone is not like physically at their desk, that they're not working, right? So with the evolution of traditional workspaces becoming a more like office/remote hybrid in the face of COVID, I think that outlook is kind of more in our rearview mirror, but I can definitely remember the days when people thought like if people were not physically sitting at their desk, typing away on their computer that that they weren't working. So not true all the time. Anyone else have anything else they want to share? Any biases that you could type in the chat or?
And if you're not up for sharing, you can always just reflect and kind of write one down on a piece of paper if you have it nearby. But it's important to kind of think of the way we think of the right way to work, right? This is something that we can really be critical of, not only other people, but ourselves in that respect. I'm going to give it just another probably like 10 seconds in case somebody wants to jump in and share. Ooh, I like this one. Brianna, a good work day is 8 consistent hours of productivity. Oh, that's a big one. I like that a lot. You know, that's a lot of what we're talking about today. And who is consistently doing anything for 8 hours?
In fact, it's not good to do that, right? Like, that's not a good thing.
That's not healthy at all, for sure. There's no way. And I'm glad that you brought it up, because that's a good one that we're going to talk about for sure. So Brianna, thank you so much for sharing. That's a great one. If the other ones, I'm going to keep moving along, but if other ones come to mind of maybe some biases you may have, like, let's chat about them. Feel free to pop them in the chat. Okay, so let's talk more about dismantling the right way to work. In 2001, Tema Kuhn wrote her original paper on white supremacy culture, the tenets of it, and how we hold ourselves tightly to these ideals, which can cause a very staunch mindset, inflexibility, and subsequently judgment of others. It really takes the humanistic side out of people and how we treat and interact with them. She did do a reiteration of this article in 2021 in light of the most recent iteration of the Black Lives Matter movements in 2020. So it does have some updates. I definitely recommend it. It's a really good reading, and it provides a lot of insight on American culture and maybe why we perceive things the way we perceive things. So some of these ideals of white supremacy culture include perfectionism, one right way of doing things, urgency around tasks, and many more. These attributes really inherently contribute to a culture of the right way and the wrong way. Now, when we talk about white supremacy culture, what we're really talking about, because I know that phrase can sound a little intense at times, but we're really discussing what contributes to this very white American mindset of one way or the right way, and ignores people and other people from other experiences and subsequently cultures. So we're really talking about the deep-seated approaches that may cause us to be closed off. And we talk about racism and white supremacy culture and these contributing factors, especially from the DEIJ perspective. We're really talking about learning how and why we react the way we do, and learning how to be more open-minded and not being too rigid and being more mindful. Like I said, I know this phrase can sound intense, but we're simply talking about relearning our learned biases of others and ourselves. Ramona, that's all you. Next up.
Sorry, I forgot to unmute myself.
No
So in terms of boundaries, we need to talk about boundaries, right? Thinking of a boundary as a non-negotiable standard, rule, or policy that you typically follow, right? Boundaries help you say no to certain things and yes to the things that are really vital to your well-being and productivity. So not only do boundaries clear chaos and clutter from your inbox, calendar, and mind, they act kind of like an armor protecting your attention from the millions of distractions that you're bombarded with daily. And creating boundaries helps you be more proactive in aligning your goals and priorities. I know many of us are operating with reduced staff and smaller budgets. If your office is self-funded, you've likely been greatly impacted by these last 2 years by reduced student mobility, causing anxiety. These consequences are tied to general feelings of uncertainty and anxiety in the international education industry as the pandemic continues. And folks may be afraid to speak up, and that's absolutely understandable. I think we're all in this sort of weird space right now where we have these things happening at work, things happening outside in the world, and no one's really certain how to navigate it. So it's important to understand where our boundaries are and exploring that. And this is a time for a great self-reflection, right? Taking stock of yourself. So even before COVID, the lines between our work and private lives were greatly blurred. There's certainly been conversations around this topic, but as we edge toward a slowdown of the pandemic, fingers crossed, we should ask ourselves why setting boundaries with work still feels so tough. One reason might be technology and how it has normalized the lack of boundaries in our lives. As recently as of about 15 years ago, thinking about public transportation was filled with people reading books or newspapers rather than looking at their phone for a live feed of constant information, right? And even in more recent years, there's been this technological convergence where every messaging app is available to every device. So while this has created more freedom and flexibility around where and when we work, the other side of that coin is that it has really blurred the boundaries and made it difficult to draw hard lines around where and when we work as well. Having our phones with us at all times and checking work email on them kind of gradually crept up on us. And before we really knew the implications of what that meant, it's become the norm. So the key is to start bringing awareness to this. Some of us may feel a sense of guilt when we stick to our prescribed work hours. I think someone dropped in the chat like the working the 9 to 5 thing is a bias, right? And that kind of feeds into that guilt. So perhaps it's worth exploring why this makes you feel guilty. Is it unfinished tasks that you leave on your desk or unanswered emails that have something to do with it? But it may be helpful to flip that perspective basically and look at it if you're going to, if your hours are say like 8 to 4:30 and you leave at 4:30 on the dot, do you feel guilty about that, or is it liberating, right? So in terms of flipping that perspective and looking at it, not that you're leaving work, but instead you're going to like someplace else, whether that be going to a yoga class or going to game night with friends. So kind of flipping that deficit perspective a little bit and saying, I'm not leaving work, I'm going to yoga class. I'm going to go hang out with my partner or walk my dog or whatever it is. And that's just all part of that perspective shift.
Awesome. Ramona, I think you make some really, really great points, especially with the flipping the script on that perspective. And even, I'm going to go sit and watch my shows. Like, even if you don't have plans, make those plans for yourself. Do those things that serve you.
Exactly.
Okay, so talking about metrics of success for your institution. This is another spot for audience involvement. We're going to get into it. I know we've had a long day. To unmute or pop in the chat and answer this for us. So what are the metrics of success at your institution? Do you know the answer to this question? That's the really big question. Recently this spring for my organization, our metric of success has been about getting interested students to sign up as such in our system. But we talk a lot on our team about how metrics of success really vary based on the schools we're working with. So as a regional person, the way that I work with UW-Platteville versus UW-Milwaukee and the metrics of success there are going to look really, really different. Certain institutions have mobility and certain institutions do not have mobility and different types of mobility. So like maybe faculty-led isn't running, but a full semester through a provider is running. So those metrics need to change a little bit. Ramona, what are they looking like for y'all right now?
I think you're right. I think they're changing a little bit. It's sort of not a static thing. I think at UW-Milwaukee, we tend to send more students on the short-term faculty-led programs and less students on like long-term semester and year-long programs. Given the complexities of operating a short-term faculty-led program during a pandemic, I think we're looking hard at how we might be able to mix that up a little bit more. So yeah, definitely the ultimate goal, the ultimate metric is, butts and planes and off or doing study abroad or virtual experiences, but really we're looking to mix up examining our portfolio a little bit more, and shifting that goal a little bit.
It's interesting when it is so malleable and a little bit different. Okay, I'm seeing this. Institution, division, and office will vary even further for view of success. It makes it hard to balance. Colleen, thank you for saying that. That's a really, really good point. And if you're getting kind of those mixed messages across your campus, it makes it really hard to know when you feel successful, right? So we're talking about feeling guilty around work, but are we talking even about feeling successful around work? When do we feel that success, right? We're going to keep moving forward, but if you have other things that come up, again, put them in the chat, or unmute is fine too. Okay, so this might seem like a little bit of a topic switch, but I promise you it's all going to tie in together. So let's talk about working from home versus work from the office. When Ramona and I started this presentation, we talked a lot about our experiences over the past 2 to 3 years, and what those have looked like, because we both had very different experiences. I love working from home. It's really nice. And honestly, when I'm on campus, like I am right now, I call campuses my office, really. But I do miss the office at times. It kind of bums me out. Whereas Ramona feels like she can focus more at her office. So it's a totally different switch. And there isn't one that's inherently better than the other, but they do have their own perks. As somebody who works from home, I really feel like I missed out on that brainstorming and innovation time I can get by bringing a project or like an issue to one of my colleagues in person, where I can just stop by, right? I don't really have that same ability. And I feel like I'm kind of missing that sense of community too. But I'm incredibly on top of my laundry. My sheets are on a 2-week rotation, and I don't know if it's because I'm getting older or because I'm working from home. Ramona, I know you feel like your experience of being in the office has been very beneficial. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, no, I can appreciate both sides as well, Lily, but I feel like, I mean, I was one of those people that came back to the office. I couldn't wait to get back. Like when the lockdown was over immediately in 2020, I was one of the first people back in, because I really preferred like the sense of being in my office space, and it just felt more productive to me. But I understand the work from home benefits as well. I mean, I also love being able to prep dinner on my lunch hour. So there are those benefits like that I lose when I'm actually physically in the office. But I really think that, you know, if whether it's you prefer being in the office or being at home or a hybrid of that, it's really just kind of knowing where your comfort zone is and what your boundaries are within that framework.
Yeah, you just touched on, Ramona, you just brought up the topic we're going to say a lot more through this presentation. It's you know yourself best. Truly, that's kind of the key here. So going back to my previous question on metrics of success, sometimes identifying these can help us acknowledge and identify when we are successful and when we know we're being successful. So I feel like I hear it more and more. So many of us have imposter syndrome, or feel like we're not doing enough or doing right by our students. Identifying your metrics of success can really allow you to find which working from style, whether it's home or office, is the right fit for you if you do have that flexibility. And I just want to acknowledge the fact that not everybody has the ability to kind of choose between those two, but you can cultivate these to work better for your work style. So moving on with that. So let's say you are exclusive office. Do you know what type of flexibility is available to you? Are you asking the right questions? Is flexibility something that is transparent and given by your office, determined before you even ask? Or is it a case-by-case basis, right? We all have the days where the kid is sick, the dog is sick, maybe there's a mattress delivery, or there's some other kind of crisis happening. Do you know what is available to you from your employer when these things come up? Is there a possibility to work from home if it is helpful? And if so, what are the procedures for that? If you don't know the answers to these questions, this is something I would bring up with your supervisor, manager, with HR, whoever it might be, to start the conversation going. The situation we're talking about right now is a case by case, and it's a good way to start to open the door instead of going in and saying, hey, we want to do a mental health work from home day twice a month, right? Knowing that preliminary flexibility for life circumstances is a good way to start the conversation. So related to that, what does personal sick time look like? Depending on your vacation and your sick leave, you may not want to use those days up for minor illnesses. So is there an ability to still work if it's not a risk to your health? You also obviously need to reflect and ask yourself if this is a boundary you personally feel comfortable crossing. If you know about yourself that you will work even if you have 104-degree fever, maybe it's a better decision to plan to take those sick days. You know yourself best. But using these questions to determine your office's flexibility is a great way to get started. Starting these conversations with your managers, your supervisors, your HR is really the first step. All right, let's talk a little bit about that work-life balance. Give me a thumbs up react if you work from home and if you feel like you need to be immediately responsive to anything when you work from home. Okay, I'm seeing a thumbs up. Cause like, okay, I'm seeing a few. Awesome. Same, hard same. Ramona was mentioning earlier about having all of the contacting apps on your phone as well. And man, if I hear my Teams go off, I have it on my phone, and whether I'm making lunch or just, running for a quick break for some water or to use the restroom, it's like I need to respond right away. Oh, Kathy, I think you bring up a very good question. Immediately responsive during work hours or anytime. That's a very good point. I do feel like it sometimes that it's anytime. So I guess both are the questions. So if you want to respond in the chat, please elaborate a little bit more. Do you feel like you need to be responsive during work hours and anytime, or is it more focused on work hours? Okay. It's super easy to feel that feeling and feel like you're under a microscope. We do have a few suggestions and ways that you can combat that feeling and setting good boundaries for yourself. Let's see. Oh, my own standard to uphold, not necessarily who is sending the message. That's a very good point. That's where it gets tricky. It's how much are you holding yourself to these ideals versus you feel that pressure. And if you feel that pressure, how do you have that conversation? So let's talk through a few of the things that can help a little bit with the work from home pressure. The first one is setting a personal schedule. Ramona suggested this great idea of a startup and a wind down routine, and I just love it. For example, my startup routine is I load up my computer while I make some tea, and then I sift through my emails and get to anything urgent before I really start my day. My wind down routine is about 30 minutes before my day ends. I sort through anything last minute that's urgent that needs to get taken care of. And then I take some time to prep and prioritize for the next day. It just makes me feel better because I don't know about y'all, but sometimes I get those Sunday scaries middle of the week where I'm like, oh no, what do I have tomorrow? But if I end my day by knowing what I have tomorrow, I can focus on my personal life, which is really nice. Another recommendation is identifying your workspace. It's really crucial to create that clear divide between your work and your personal space. I'm lucky enough to have an office in my apartment, which feels like a true separation. So I'm one of the lucky ones. I can separate that personal and that work life. I've also made the decision that in my office, I work from my desktop, which forces me to physically walk away from the computer. I can't bring my laptop out to my living room, or I can't bring my desktop out to my living room. I have to actually separate myself from it and take that break. And then our last recommendation is prioritization. And this kind of goes back to that question of how urgently do you feel like you need to respond? It can be really hard to identify how urgent something is. Give me a virtual thumbs up if you have ever decided to finish something, not because it's urgent, but because it's one less thing on your plate. All right, I saw immediate thumbs up. I know that feeling for sure. In that decision though, are you truly prioritizing your well-being and your mental health? Ramona mentioned this back on a previous slide, and it's so true, but how often are you leaving yourself out to dry just to get one more thing completed? It's a good thing to reflect on for sure.
And I just want to say about the whole Teams pinging thing, there's something about the instant messaging system that I think it is sort of an internal reaction oftentimes rather than an external force, but there's something about that expectation of replying immediately to a Teams message or a Slack message, whatever your organization uses, versus email. There's something in our culture that makes you think that you have to reply to that immediately.
Pavlov's dog. That is so good. No, it's so right. And honestly, how often, if you are working from home and you get that ping, like how often, if you were in the office, would it be, oh, I'll answer that once this email is done, or I'll get to that once I have a minute. So how much are you holding yourself to these ideals or like this set of rules because you feel this guilt of working from home, or you just need to say what you're messaged about after hours? That's a very good point too. I'm looking through the chat because I'm seeing some really great responses here, y'all. Thank you so much for chiming in. This is why I'll typically check and respond to work emails during time off, because it feels like it's going to be more overwhelming to deal with a big backlog when I return. Yeah, absolutely. But how much, I mean, I guess that begs the question then, you know, Ramona and I had both just taken those nice week-long vacations where, you know, we both got to spend some time with our loved ones and really like disengage, which is great for us. And how much does your work actually think that you need to be that much on top of it? You know, I went through a practice when I was gone for that week, when I came back on Monday, of thinking through, okay, I should take this time to get through these emails, and I don't need to do it until I'm back in the office at those hours. Like we'll get to this quote in a little bit, but I'm not saving babies. There's nothing that urgent. And I will say, with the caveat that some of you do have very important roles where you're dealing with student emergencies. And obviously those are a different situation. I'm not telling you to go prioritize your mental health and leave a student in the hospital or anything like that. Just an important thing. Ramona, can I get the next slide?
Yes.
Thank you.
I was going to say something about that.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
But it kind of went out of my head.
Oh no. If it comes back.
Okay.
Okay, so work-life integration. This is a new concept and we're going to talk a little bit about it. It's not the right fit for everybody. I went to a conference in January that had a session on work-life integration. It's the idea of allowing people to focus on completing their tasks for the day, personal and professional, throughout their entire day. This can look like grocery shopping during work hours and then maybe working for a bit once your kid goes to bed. A great example of this is I have a colleague, we'll call him Aaron. Now, Aaron has 2 young kids and he loves spending time and prioritizes spending time with them, as you should when your children are young and you're a parent. And so throughout the day, it's very typical for him to drop his kids off at school, pick them up, make their snacks, and have a proper family dinner with them. So sometimes I get emails from Aaron at 10 p.m. and sometimes I'm like, are you doing okay? But this is because he has that work-life integration. So he's really making sure that everything that needs to get done is getting done. It just may not be getting done at the same time or in the same exact order as a normal workday will work. It's also important to note that with work-life integration, this isn't going to work. Some employers have a very strict, 9-to-5 schedule. If you're in office, it's going to be obviously even harder. But as long as you are hitting those metrics of success and feeling that, you're getting your things taken care of, there's nothing wrong with taking care of your personal things during the day as well. Like I said, it doesn't work for everybody. And like I mentioned, with working from home when you're sick, you have to know yourself to know what's actually feasible.
That's pretty cool that his organization allows that integrated part and it's not super structured, and that works for him. I think that's awesome. I know I'm the type that I have to stay at work and finish what I need to finish because I'm unlikely to visit when I get home, like log into work and things like that. It's like pulling teeth with me. So I admire people that can do that, kind of like buzz in and out of work. And I remember what I was going to say about the other slide. When you had mentioned vacation, Lily, I remember because you and I were on consecutive week vacations. The last week I was on vacation, and I remember I do have, my phone is also my appendage, and I do have my Teams app on my phone. And I remember really getting a little anxiety of muting all the channels on my phone while I was on vacation. But I was like, I'm going to do this, and I'm not going to worry about it. And I just muted everything. And then it was fine. And then also I had that Sunday night before I came back, this past Sunday night before I came back to work, like I should probably log on and just go through my emails and get a jump start on Monday. And I reevaluated that and I was like, nah, it can wait until Monday. I'm still in vacation mode. So those kinds of things that tether you to work prematurely a little bit or extra it's sometimes not even worth it. Like things will be taken care of. Things can wait a little bit longer. So.
And pat yourself on the back for that. And remember, people are receiving you out of office. They know you're away. And if they know you're away for a week, they don't expect you to respond first thing Monday either. You know, how many times have you talked to a colleague and they've been like, oh, I'm on vacation, and you're excited for that, right? You want them to have that time just as much as you need that time for yourself.
Agreed. Okay, acts of kindness and grace. So try to understand what your colleagues are dealing with at home can go a long way, right? So while everyone is facing the same worldwide threats of the pandemic, not everyone is facing the same circumstances. We don't know how someone is doing until we take the time to ask how they're doing. And it's important to remember that just because someone was doing well yesterday does not mean that they're doing well today or the same today. So regular check-ins are important in terms of keeping that healthy relationship going with your colleagues. Set the example. Show others it's okay to ask for help by doing it yourself when you need help. Asking for help is not a sign of weakness, rather it is a sign of self-awareness and strength, really. It's kind of our superpower. By asking for help ourselves, it supports and encourages others to do the same when they need it. Be forgiving and patient. We're all managing an increased cognitive load as we continue to adapt to a new way of living and working. Many of us are dealing with a staffing shortage. Mistakes will happen and things may slip through the cracks. Some of us may have extenuating living circumstances, such as caring for loved ones or living in multi-generational households. Managing these circumstances can be difficult. And instead of calling out occasional mistakes that someone might make, use it as an opportunity to check in with them and see how things are going. Because again, we never really know how people are dealing with this ever-changing situation with the pandemic. Messy hair, don't care, right? So many of us continue to work from home in some capacity. Messy hair, messy home, background noise. I know we have the ability to like blur your background or drop in a fake background of a tropical setting or something where you might want to be, where else you might want to be being, but it's okay, and make it okay for people to not be perfect by acknowledging upfront in meetings and conversations and things like that. Also, when you share that you don't have it all together all the time, it builds trust and supports others to do the same. So again, that sort of reciprocity and not perfect, you know, that encourages people to kind of let down their guard as well.
Ramona, I love that you said that. I actually never put on a virtual background because I'm like, this, you're getting who I am. You're getting
Really?
all of me and all of what I have, you know, and I have a little globe. I have a little Eagles helmet. I'm like to show my personality in it. And I'm lucky enough to have my workspace too. So that makes it easy.
So you never put on a blur or any sort of fake background. That's interesting.
I did it for the first time during a conference because it was like, it had the, first timer, like the badges.
Oh, sure. That's interesting. Huh. A lot of people, I think, always put on their background, or I don't know. It's interesting. Personal preference or guardedness. I don't know. So nurture a culture of gratitude. When we flood our mind with the constant flow of worry, self-criticism, compounded by a barrage of news and other media, we often internalize it and it impacts our mental well-being. So help nurture a culture of gratitude with your peers by always expressing your appreciation when people either join a meeting or when you see them, acknowledging when someone finishes a task, or just reaching out to offer support in general again, can go a long way. So in a nutshell, when people feel valued and appreciated, they're likely to open up. And when they don't feel valued and appreciated, they're likely to shut down. So be kind, unwind. I was joking with Lily earlier that I didn't know how many people would get that reference, but I put it in there anyway. For anyone old enough to remember things like Blockbuster and what that meant. So things like these are really things that you can do to kind of be kind to yourself, and again helps with your boundary setting. Blocking off your lunch on your calendar, it's actually a thing. The point isn't to be inflexible about it, but seeing it actually on your calendar as a daily reminder to take that time for yourself. I don't block off my lunch on my calendar, but I almost always will take either a quick walk around campus or just get outside to get some fresh air. Most days, there's some days where I miss it. Again, giving yourself grace along, like, okay, I didn't get outside today. But that's really, if you're the kind of person where you need that reminder, that daily reminder, that's one way that you can do that.
To that point, Ramona, just to jump in quick,
Mhm.
since our team works across so many different time zones, people forget about other people's lunch hour and when they end or start their day and things like that. So blocking off my lunch on my calendar has allowed me to like preserve some bit of peace and say, no, this is my time. And I can be flexible with that. You know, if there's a day and there's something happening, I can do an 11 to 12 or a 12 to 1. But taking that lunch and taking that time, especially if your lunch is an unpaid time, is really, really important.
Yeah, I think we forget that sometimes because I had often in the past fallen into the trap of eating my lunch at my desk and not really leaving my desk, even like pre-COVID. But I think COVID really kind of cured me of that and woke me up. Like, I need to step away. I need like some fresh air or to clear my mind, and it's just so beneficial. So another important thing is to define what support looks like for you. This, of course, varies by person and can even vary within time. But what worked for you last fall may not work for you this summer. So this is also related to how you build your community. So surrounding yourself with a supportive group of people that have a common goal or understand your struggles, your goals, and things like that is incredibly important. Explore what helps you to stay focused, whether it's breathing exercises, mindfulness, a walk outside, using part of your lunch to watch a show that you're addicted to. That's perfectly okay. But the important thing is that you're figuring out what works for you. Having a healthy relationship with your inbox. I did not always have a healthy relationship with my inbox. I know I have a just one more email mentality, and I struggle to pull myself out of email because there's more to work life really than just checking email, right? So recognizing when it's time to shut down and maybe pivot to someone else. I think someone had mentioned something like that in the chat earlier, like just trying to do one more thing to help with tomorrow. But really it's important to assess, is this really something that can wait until tomorrow? Is this really going to have detrimental effect on someone? So just kind of recognizing and prioritizing that. The phone attachment, again, considering it as an appendage, basically. It's easy to be tempted to check your work email if you have it on your phone. Technology has become this blessing and curse, so to speak, and it's important to recognize when to draw the line. Yeah, so then I do have my work email on my phone. I don't have it set to notify me, but I feel like it started as sort of like a convenience thing, right? If I needed to respond to something urgent, I could do it. So I'm pretty good with not checking email on my phone. Teams is another thing. Again, I think mentally, I feel like the Teams notifications, I'm like always in tune with that. But for email, I feel like I have a pretty healthy relationship with it on my phone, at least. Let's see. So takeaway strategies. So that practicing the art of saying no. I have a colleague who loves to say no is a complete sentence, like no explanation needed. It's a one word complete sentence, and she loves to stick with that. So it is an art though, practicing an art, a deft way of saying no to someone is an important thing to practice. But it does bring in a valuable practice to setting healthy boundaries, right? It really helps you to recognize and to express to people when you're able to take on more things and when you simply don't have the bandwidth anymore for your own mental health. So practicing that art of saying no is a really important thing to master. You can rank your job priorities and go over those with your boss, right? Your supervisor or manager is the person who can help you to sort of prioritize everything and encapsulate it in a good way, and then help you to really understand what you can trim and what you need to keep, and that will help you to set your boundaries as well. And then of course, prioritizing self-care. That's a great way to emphasize that no, we all need to have that good mental health check with each other. We talked a little bit earlier about creating a startup and shutdown routine. I'm curious, I have my own startup and shutdown routine, but if anyone has an interesting sort of routine that they do, like pretty much when they first get in the morning and when they end their day, I'm curious to know what they are. I personally love to do the New York Times spelling bee. It helps, I feel like, to get my little brain juices going, and sometimes the Wordle. I spend a few minutes doing that as I'm kind of getting organized and settling in, and then before I jump into actual work stuff. I like to kind of go through my inbox at the end of the day, again, to kind of purge things that I've already taken care of, see if I've missed anything. On a weekly basis, I love to spend Fridays just like kind of going through my to-do list and redoing that if I need to. But that's kind of my routine. So the startup and shutdown routine. And then sticking to a schedule. Like there are some time tracking apps out there that people use, like Clockify or Time Camp. I think they're free. There's a paid subscription as well, but those are things that can help you kind of monitor where you're spending your time and where you might be able to be more efficient. And just, again, extending grace to yourself, remembering it's yoga, like there's a saying, it's yoga practice, not yoga perfect. So the same goes for your boundaries. Some days you'll have be better at adhering to boundaries, and other days not so much.
I think you make a really good point. I stick to a schedule is I do all my emails before 10 a.m. Anything that comes in after 10 a.m. ends up going to my next day unless it's super urgent, or I have the time in my schedule. So we're rounding out the end of the presentation. I know we're getting close to time, so we got a couple slides left. We might go over by a minute. Just want to give everybody a heads up. But if you've got questions right now, feel free to pop them in the chat and we'll make sure to get to them before everything ends up. So you see the question here on the screen, how many of you take a water cooler break at work? And what do we mean by water cooler break, right? So for those of you who work in an office, give me a thumbs up if you ever leave your office to go get a Starbucks or go on a walk around the building or go across campus for a treat or go to say hi to a friend or a colleague. Okay, awesome. So it's important that we break up our day with these very, very normal tasks. And I know, Ramona, you talked about you usually try to do a walk every day. Any other things that you do while you're on campus?
Me, or is that for the general?
You, but also anybody can pop in the chat. We love feedback and ideas.
I mean, in addition to that, I will oftentimes like visit a colleague if they're here in the office, or I might walk over to the student union for a snack. But just the act of getting out for like fresh air and stepping away from my desk is super important.
Absolutely. Okay, so now for those of you who work from home, how often do you take a walk outside or grab a coffee and you're not doing chores, like house chores or apartment chores? Can I get a thumbs up if anybody has found a way, work from home, to break up their day that isn't also a chore? All right, I'm seeing one. That's good. That's great. You've already got this on lock. Okay, I'm seeing two. Lunch walk, awesome. So you understand my point here, which work from home doesn't mean you don't get the right to take breaks like these. Figure out, if you don't already have it, what's your walk around the block? Whether it's a walk or a 5-minute timer to watch some TikToks, or for me, watering my plants, which I know it sounds like a chore, but it really brings me so much joy. But make sure the thing that is your breaking up your day is truly bringing you joy and isn't just an extra task of something that you need to do. All right, so this is a phrase we've heard even more since COVID hit, extending grace. And I'll use another, now more than ever. We need to ensure we're really extending grace to our colleagues and ourselves. Really reevaluate those habits that cause you harm and take time for your mental health intentionally. Talk to your supervisors and your team about these topics. If you are a supervisor sitting in this meeting, think through the ways that you can have those discussions with your supervisees about flexibility and what kind of opportunities the team may have. The more this is discussed, much like Ramona already said, the more comfortable people will be with authentically moving forward within their bandwidth. And then we've got a little quote here. I wrote up this slide, but I actually want to hand it over to Ramona to elaborate on this fun little quote. She came up with an amazing analogy when we talked about this section.
Yes. Actually, it was my colleague. So I was talking with a colleague the other day, and this is I think this is great what you have here. It is rare that our day-to-day tasks have us saving lives, and we cannot truly support our students and programs if we do not firstly support ourselves. So what my colleague mentioned the other day, we were talking about self-care and all that. And she said, it's kind of like when you take a flight and the flight crew says, you know, when the oxygen mask comes down, make sure you put your oxygen mask on before assisting others. It's kind of the same thing. Like, you have to really do your self-care first. It's your instinct, I know, to help your child, your partner, your parent, whatever it might be, your loved one. But it really is important to take care of yourself first before you can sort of help others on their journey.
Absolutely. And really concludes what we were chatting about today. So we're not experts in self-care. I don't think anybody really is, but hopefully this provided some tips and tricks and conversation starters to start the process of feeling a little bit more comfortable about setting those boundaries. We have our emails up here if you do have additional questions outside of chatting here now, but thank you for joining us today. We really appreciate it.
Thanks, everyone. We hope if you're going in the raffle, good luck, but have a great rest of the conference. We appreciate you attending.
Yes, thank you, Lily and Ramona, for presenting today. And yes, if you get all interested in joining us at 4 o'clock for the raffle, that'd be fantastic. And otherwise, if you had any questions, feel free to hang out with Lily and Ramona for just a moment. But thank you so much for joining us today.